Welcome to the Into AI Safety podcast, where we document my shift to a career in AI safety. This show aims to serve as a mentorship proxy for those getting into the field, and a mentorship amplifier for our guests and myself. As always, I am your host, Jacob Haynes. During the podcast, you may hear this sound, which denotes that I have included at least one link related to the content that preceded the sound. The purpose of this is to allow for citations and providing resources without breaking the flow of conversations. As per usual, items mentioned during asides will have links in the show notes as well. I hope you guys are ready, because this episode is full of drama and intrigue. Now, before I get into it, I want to remind everyone that at the time of this recording, StakeOut.AI was a non-profit, but the week prior to the first episode of this interview being released, it had to dissolve because no grantor would fund them. They were receiving some donations from devoted individuals, but meaningfully helping the many victims of the AI industry requires a non-trivial amount of funding, and that requires some larger players to put their money where their mouth is. And let me be clear, this was not for lack of trying. Peter, Harry, and their third team member, whose current job requires that their name be removed from past advocacy efforts, had well-defined, meaningful goals, had demonstrated their capacity to get things done, and were applying for funding to continue their work through multiple different sources. But despite their many attempts at applying, all of these grant applications were rejected. Now, on that upbeat note, let's get to the content. Dr. Park briefs us on what he believes are the 5 so-called battlegrounds in the fight for beneficial AI, and I try my best to pull him off topic. Well, no, that's not actually what I did, but you might think that was what I was trying to do based on how the conversation goes. Anyways, we'll talk about AI and copyright, the drama surrounding the nonprofit board of OpenAI trying to fire Sam Altman back in November of 2023, and at least one way in which Tesla's recycling and French regulators can be linked. So basically, the thought there is like, okay, and something that the Divide and Conquer paper brings up,
right,
is there are these battlegrounds,
yes,
of different, I guess, like things or ideas or like framings,
right,
of the problem that need to be addressed sort of independently.
Yes.
But, then together, addressing all of them is what brings, to, as a society, we are able to use AI for good and net benefit. And so I'm wondering, I guess, how you would break down the current battlegrounds, and also any that you are, expecting in the near future as well.
That's a good question. So, to continue our previous train of thought, the first battleground, I think it's going to be copyright.
Right.
Just what is the situation with AI and copyright? What we as a society, how do we agree to answer that question? Mm-hmm. I think that's the first battleground. So when I was writing this paper, and also in the same time as when StakeOut.AI was in conversation with the very, very angry digital artists, some of whom were on the verge of giving up, and we keep saying, no, just believe in the strength of a united front, not just united digital artists, but also other occupations who are on the chopping block. So this first battleground is AI and copyright. There was a situation where there was a digital artist who felt like the lawyers weren't taking the AI replacement threat seriously. And that's why, the digital artists they felt like they could be getting much more progress on the copyright front if they had opportunities for more and more lawyers and better lawyers. But their calls were initially unheeded. They're having difficulty. And there was a very successful, as I said, AI Industries social influence campaign in just being they're going to lose anyway. They're just, they're just anti-technology. Just, this is inevitable. And I think now the vibe has very changed. For example, the New York Times teamed up with the law firm, Sussman Goffrey. And once you have that, then now we have the potential of real precedent being like AI training is copyright infringement. It is not fair use. So the digital artists are, very, very were very, very ecstatic about that event when the New York Times, working with this very good law firm, Sussman Goffrey, like the digital artists who previously, when nobody was heeding their call, they felt very like on the verge of giving up. Oh, maybe it is inevitable. But once you had the other occupations, like the journalists and lawyers jump in, the best of each of those businesses jump in and be like, okay, like this is a united front. This is a shared threat. They literally have admitted in OpenAI's charter or in their EAC Death Cult manifesto or principles that their goal is to replace all of us. We're not going to stand for this. And that is this first battleground, and how just the unity can be the difference between being on the verge of giving up and almost feeling like we are the winning side. We just have to keep up the good fight. So that's the first battleground, AI and copyright. The second battleground is moral critique of AI collaborationists. So
okay, can you go into what that
means?
Is?
So AI collaborationists are the types of people that I've discussed earlier. EAC. These are the people in the AI industry who don't think there are trade-offs, who think them making boatloads of money by stealing people's data and replacing people out of a job, and eventually potentially replacing the human species, is the right thing to do. It's the inevitable or morally obligated, a moral obligation to do.
Okay.
These people are probably the most hardcore of what I call AI collaborationism, just collaborating with the other side, AI, and not with humanity.
Okay.
And the less extreme side, I would say, is employees in the AI industry, or even executives in the AI industry, making a lot of money, and knowing that they're in this soup is this death cult motivated by profit and by the cult mentality. But just being like, I'm making a lot of money, these guys are probably not serious, the risks are probably overblown, let's just keep it going. So there, I would say there's a spectrum of what I call AI collaboration, collaborating with the other side, AI, and not with humans. And I think it's very important to mention how, like, the amount, I would say, of money, power, and AI capability, technical expertise in the most extreme side of AI collaborationism is quite high. It's probably much higher than you expect.
Right.
Do you know Professor Rich Sutton?
Yeah.
University
I was
of
thinking
Alberta?
about bringing him up at one point.
This is a perfect time to bring him. So this guy, he's not just a crazy person. I do think he's crazy, but he's a crazy person who has pioneered the very important method in AI called reinforcement learning, literally co-authored the textbook on the subject.
Gotcha.
He was the first ever advisor of Google DeepMind. So this is someone who has the AI technical chops, who is very, very deeply connected to the AI industry. He gave a talk at the World Artificial Intelligence Conference in Shanghai. This past year, I guess it's 2024. This past year, he gave this talk. And it started like a normal academic talk at an AI conference. He talked about, AI is becoming more and more, there's a lot of money flowing into AI in the era of large language models. A lot of money, a lot of talent, especially after the popularity of OpenAI's ChatGPT brought AI to the public consciousness. So you have a lot of investor frenzy funding going into AI research and products. You have a lot of talented programmers and developers and researchers going into AI research and products. And then he talked about Moore's Law and very, very steady, faster than exponential decrease in the cost of compute. Very, very tight trend. And he said, if we extrapolate this trend, we will get human brain level computers for $1,000 by 2030. So a human brain level computer, by some estimates, if you extrapolate this very, very tight trend that has persisted for 110 years, over 100 years. So if you take this Moore's law and if you extrapolate it, you get to the estimate that a human brain level computing power will cost just $1,000 by the year 2030, which is just in 6 years.
Right.
So far, this is just a normal AI talk. To people who are not paying attention to the AI technological race, this last part of like, oh, if Moore's law, this 100-year trend continues, then we'll have human brain level computers in 6 years for just $1,000. That part will probably freak people out, but this is just normal AI talk.
Like, right, yeah, I mean, because it's not saying that those computers will do anything. It's just saying that their compute power is equivalent to
a human brain. That's right.
Brain, which is very different.
Yeah, it was very different. And Professor Sutton also mentions this is just the hardware. The software, it might come right away. It might take a bit longer. So there is debate over how long the software for super intelligent AI would take to develop once the hardware is ready. Of course, in this debate, the ones who tend to have financial conflicts of interest tend to say, oh, the software will take way longer. And the ones that do not have financial conflicts of interest tend to say the software might not take longer. It might even just be the current just paradigm of like stochastic gradient descent training transformers. Like that's like so disagreement on how whether it would come right away or it would take a bit longer, as Professor Sutton said. But I just want to say this is just maybe above average forward thinking, but like very, very technical, very, very prescient, high quality talk so far.
Sure.
Like he's not crazy yet.
Okay.
But he becomes crazy in the second part of the talk when he says, oh yeah, once we have human brain level computers for $1,000 in 6 years, then the succession to AI is inevitable. And then he shows the evolution of the human species, that image, and then he puts an AI at the very end. Then he talks about how we should not resist the inevitable replacement of the human species by AI.
Okay.
Have you seen this?
I have. I don't think I saw all of it because I was like,
got it.
Yeah, this guy's weird. Okay, and then like after he started talking about it, I was like, I have other things that I have to be working on.
Got it.
I'll watch it again.
Yeah, let me just tell you some quotes from this talk. So the second part of the talk, which is the pro-human replacement of, part. So the first part of the talk, I agree with, is very academic, very technical. Second part of like, should we let humanity be replaced by AI? Strong disagreement with Professor Sutton. Here are some of his quotes from the second part of the talk.
Okay.
Quote, inevitably, we will create our successors. It need not be viewed as bad in any way. We've known this was coming since the beginning of AI. Unquote. So that's the first quote I wanted to talk about. The second quote says, quote, rather quickly, they would displace us from existence. ... It behooves us to give them every advantage and to bow out when we can no longer contribute. Unquote.
Yeah. Super weird.
Super weird. Third quote I want to say is, I don't think we should fear succession. I think we should not resist it. We should embrace it and prepare for it. Why would we want greater beings, greater AIs, more intelligent beings kept subservient to us? Unquote. So these are three, particularly egregious quotes I found from this second, very disagreeable part of this.
Right. Yeah. I don't. Yeah.
If you have nothing to say, that's very common response. And this guy, like, I would say there are two responses to something of this magnitude. Number one is, they're just a death cultist who is just blabbering about. They can't actually bring it about. And the second response is, they might be able to bring it about because he's Rich Sutton, literally the pioneer of reinforcement learning, and he's the first ever advisor at Google DeepMind. So, like, if you don't take it seriously, if you don't think the speaker has the means to actually bring that about. I think that's the difference maker, and I do think, based on the first part of the talk being very convincing, I do think that Professor Sutton, when he talks about AI will be a replacement successor species to humans, and we should not resist, I think this is a credible threat. So that is probably, that's what I think StakeOut.AI, we at StakeOut.AI and other allies need to convince people that this is a real threat. It's not like, there were past cults that did say things like this, but they didn't have the means to actually create a human extinction level event or entity. But I think it's quite plausible that this time it's different with AI. And I think even if there's just a probability that this is a real credible threat, we should act on that probability just in case it happens to be true.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's hard to comprehend sometimes, like, just, like, why do you think that? And so, it sort of leaves me lost for words, but I definitely agree that, like, this is a person who is well connected and knows what he's doing, and
right.
If he really put his mind to it, which it sounds like he at least kind of is,
yeah.
He could significantly further this goal, not necessarily independently realize it, but he could definitely contribute towards it.
That's true. And the most concerning thing about this sequence of events is that he, after giving his talk, in this presentation, he ended the final slides was first a concrete research plan to achieve this goal. This is called the Alberta Plan for AI Research. There's a whole diagram, and he talks about why he thinks it'll work. So he actually has a concrete plan to achieve this. And the following slide, the final slide of the talk, was a request for funding. And in this slide, he basically said, no equity will be retained. Everything will be in the open scientific literature. Damn! So this is not a profit-motivated person. This is a true believer he truly believes this is the right thing to do. And the most egregious thing happened not during the talk, but after the talk. After the talk, there was a decorated programmer named John Carmack.
Okay.
Who, after Professor Sutton's talk, John Carmack onboarded Professor Sutton to his AI startup. So after the talk, he was like, that's my guy. And Professor Sutton got a funding partner, an AI startup. He was onboarded to an AI startup. So to answer your question of like, will this person contribute to it or will they actually do it? The fact that he gave a talk asking for funding and then he got onboarded to an AI startup by a funding partner,
right.
I think moves the needle in the direction of, yeah, maybe his contributions will be more concrete than we think
right.
to achieve, if this ever gets accomplished, to accomplishing that.
Right. Yeah, but he's old, right?
He's, let me look up his age.
Well, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, this is the extreme side of AI collaborationism. I truly think we need to increase our society's preparedness level for people and startups.
People with that mindset.
People with that mindset.
Okay.
And a lot of these people with these mindsets, they're only known by their anonymous Twitter accounts. So we actually don't know precisely.
We don't even know if they actually believe it.
We don't even know actually, maybe, and I do think a lot of these people, they're just doing memes for fun.
Yeah.
So, yeah, like human replacement, like, yeah, like, and I think this percentage exists, but we don't know who those people are, and if, the whole point of cults is it's very possible that in some snapshot, everyone thinks it's all a joke, and then once the cult becomes very serious and very dangerous and very large, another snapshot, you have actual, the cult getting people to do some very, very crazy things, right?
Right.
So like, just the unpredictability and the unknowability of it all is very concerning as well. And again, these are the most extreme people, but just the weak but still concerning side of AI collaborationism, the more, I guess, less extreme but still concerning side is just AI AI industry employees making boatloads of money. I think if you're making boatloads, and there are entire movies about like the evil death cult who has control over just a powerful person who just wants to make money. Like, this is a very common trope in literature, especially fantasy literature and fiction literature. So in that role, the role of the people who just want to not have like strong measures to prevent the extreme collaborations, but just want to keep it the same and make 6-figure, 7-figure salaries. I think these are also concerning examples of AI collaborationism.
Before we continue to the next part, we're going to need some context for what the Time magazine characterizes as a gigantic game of chicken that happened in November of 2023. First, because it is necessary to frame everything else, we have to discuss the corporate structure of OpenAI. I know, no one wants to hear about that, but we got to do it. It helps everything else make sense. Well, that's not true at all. It helps everything else make less sense. But here we are. I'll handwave as much as possible here because it truly is boring. But the important part is that OpenAI is a for-profit company, and the CEO of that for-profit company is advised by a non-profit board, whose only real power is the ability to fire that CEO. This structure was designed to address incentives that accomplishing OpenAI's mission of creating artificial general intelligence, or AGI, would result in. That is, money and power. Now let's talk about the players. Of course, we have Sam Altman, then and current CEO of OpenAI. Although he technically has no investment in the company, he has used his position to fundraise truly remarkable amounts of money. Then we have the other board members at the time. They were Ilya Sutskever, co-founder and chief scientist of OpenAI, who is well regarded in the field of machine learning, Greg Brockman, OpenAI co-founder and president, previously CTO of Stripe. His wife, Anna Brockman, will also hop in for a cameo, but she wasn't on the board. Adam D'Angelo, co-founder and CEO of Quora. Helen Toner, director of strategy and foundational research grants at Georgetown Center for Security and Emerging Technology. And Tasha McCauley, adjunct senior management scientist at Rand Corporation. Also, Tasha McCauley is married to Joseph Gordon-Levitt, but that's irrelevant. I really wish it wasn't irrelevant. The last player in this strange game is not a human, but instead Microsoft, which has invested a lot of money and time into OpenAI. Next is the timeline. Again, I could probably do a full episode on this, but I'm trying to keep it brief. 1. Sam Altman fired by board over Google Meet completely blindsides Altman, Brockman, and Microsoft. At least that's what they say. Item 2. The board releases a statement saying that there was a deliberative review process by the board, which concluded that Sam Altman was not consistently candid with his communications. That's a direct quote. Item 3. Greg Brockman resigns as president through Twitter. 3 lead researchers follow suit. Item 4. Sutskever told the publication and presumably Jersey Shore hunk The Information that, quote, this was the board doing its duty to the mission of the nonprofit, which is to make sure that OpenAI builds AGI that benefits all of humanity, end quote. Item 5. Microsoft offers lead positions on a new advanced AI team to Altman and Brockman. Item 6. The OpenAI nonprofit board hires a different CEO after their initial interim CEO stepped down. Almost all of the OpenAI staff commit to maybe following Altman and Brockman to Microsoft, unless the board is fired and Altman and Brockman are rehired via an open letter. Sutskever signed this letter and tweeted his regret in his part in firing Altman in the first place. Item 8. After long negotiations, Sutskever, Brockman, and Toner stepped down from their positions on the board, and Altman was reinstated as CEO, barring an independent review. In March 2024, that review concluded, but the results were not made public. Nonetheless, the board unanimously voted to fully reinstate Altman. Okay, that gets past a lot of the noise and gets right at the core of the situation. But if you're interested, definitely look into it further. Actually, probably don't look into it further. You have better things to do with your time. But also, the links will of course be in the show notes.
So let me give you a concrete example. You know OpenAI's drama where Sam Altman, the CEO, got fired by the nonprofit board in charge of the company.
Oh, yeah.
And then he somehow got the OpenAI employees to threaten to mass leave. Like, I think 95+% of OpenAI employees said, we will follow Sam Altman to Microsoft. Or they actually said, we might follow Sam Altman to Microsoft unless the nonprofit board resigns and reinstates, just keep everything the same as before. Not even asking. Nonprofit board could have had a very good reason to fire Sam Altman. He's, and if you pull this off and you succeed, then Sam Altman is an unfireable CEO. And are you I don't know, it seems like there are these important structural and important questions with far-reaching consequences, and it just doesn't make a dent in the decision-making of the employees who threatened to mass leave to a for-profit company, when the main decision-making parameter, of course, is we were going to make boatloads of money, like literally millions of dollars, when the ChatGPT inspired equity was going to get to us, and that was literally going to happen right now. And Sam got fired right before, and Microsoft plus the OpenAI investors trying to threaten the nonprofit board by dangling the millions of dollars in front of the OpenAI employees. And the OpenAI employees, maybe in hindsight it was predictable, they threatened to mass leave with Sam Altman, and that got the nonprofit board to mostly resign as was threatened. Helen Toner and Tasha McCauley resigned.
Right.
Adam D'Angelo is the only remaining member from the three people who they... Ilya Sutskever was the fourth person who voted to fire Sam, but he flipped because his co-founder Greg Brockman and his co-founder's wife, I think her name is Anna Brockman. So Ilya made what I think was a courageous call to fire Sam Altman, joined the other three outsider nonprofit board directors, Helen Toner, Tasha McCauley, and Adam D'Angelo. Ilya was the difference maker in having a 4-2 majority of the board and firing Sam Altman. But again, because the financial conflict of interest and the personal relationships, financial conflicts of interest is so strong, Greg Brockman and his wife, Anna Brockman, who they're very close. I believe Ilya officiated their wedding ceremony. So they are best friends, right? Like some of the bestest friends, who have been through the thick of it, through the founding of a very, very influential, very, very powerful nonprofit, and now nonprofit technically controlling a company, OpenAI. And Anna Brockman basically, if it was presented to Ilya that he had personally betrayed his best friends, and this plus the financial conflict of interest was enough to get Ilya to flip and demand that he himself be fired from the board for the allegedly incorrect decision to fire Sam Altman.
Right.
And I think financial conflict of interest, but also just personal conflicts of interest, is going to be a factor in potentially getting people to move their decisions towards the AI collaborationism side rather than the strong but necessary sides to prevent that from happening.
Gotcha. I guess my understanding of the OpenAI thing, because I was really trying to understand what was happening. It does seem like maybe they're there weren't really concrete reasons to fire. Like, that doesn't mean that necessarily that was the wrong thing to do.
Right.
But I couldn't find, like, they didn't publish anything about, like, why he was fired.
Right. I think as part of his deal to, as part of his renegotiation to get reinstated as CEO, I think Sam Altman agreed to an internal investigation.
Yes, so I guess we'll find out.
Yeah, so it's it's unclear if we will find out, but I think somebody will. The board directors probably will find out, and they might release the findings. There might be a different decision or even a reversal. So it's still happening right now, and I think, again, like, sure, we still don't know what exactly happened, but I think the problem remains. The problem is that there was a potential. Yeah. What do you think?
At least from my perspective,
right.
The problem is that they really spent a lot of time or at least they seem to have spent a lot of time and effort trying to construct a self-governing structure for their organization.
Right.
And when it really came down to it, it didn't mean anything.
Yeah.
Like, that's the real takeaway.
That's the real takeaway.
Is that you tried to set up something that was going to be robust to exactly what we saw happen.
Right.
And we saw it not mean anything.
Exactly. The financial and personal conflicts of interest, when OpenAI employees were like, we were about to make millions of dollars, but and it was also a financially speaking, it was a very irrational choice to threaten to mass leave, right? Because if the OpenAI employees mass leave to Microsoft, if that actually happens, if OpenAI, the company, is destroyed, then the equity becomes zero. So, like, it just didn't, it was an emotional decision that I still think was prompted by financial and personal conflicts of interest, but it didn't even make sense when you think about it. And I think just not thinking about it clearly is, again, why I think AI collaborationism is such a big problem, because you have these ideologues like Professor Rich Sutton, EAC, and industry leaders in EAC like Mark Andreessen and Gary Tan in the background having a lot of string pulling power. Mm-hmm. And in this string pulling, you're going to have a bunch of AI industry employees making a lot of money. Maybe they'll keep making a lot of money and everything will turn out to be fine. I think it's very plausible that everything will not turn out. And you're already seeing harms like deepfake, non-consensual deepfake pornography of women and girls, right? Mm-hmm. Right now, everything is not fine. But you have these string pullers who just want, like, there are no trade-offs. Regulation is murder. Like, that's how they say it. And then you have, people making boatloads of money and just like, I just don't want to think. I just want to keep making money. And if something were to ever threaten that, like, I'm not going to think straight, and I might do something like you said, like just that's why the self-regulatory framework didn't work. Yeah. So the first two battlegrounds were copyright, AI and copyright.
Right. Yes.
The second battleground was moral critique of AI collaborationists.
Yes. Okay.
So just being like, this is not okay. Just let's be honest, just shaming that behavior.
Yeah.
Everything from just the egregious pro AI replacement of human sentiments, everything from that to just pretending that this is not a real threat while making boatloads of money and just wanting to fight regulation. Yeah, so everything in the spectrum, we have to just morally critique them. And yeah, the weak don't have many powers, but one of the powers of the weak is to shame people, right? Just to be like, I may be weak, but I'm still going to criticize you for that. Mm-hmm. And it's still a powerful weapon that the weak, the powerless, and the moneyless still have, right? The less connected.
Right.
So we have to make use of that.
Okay.
The third battleground I want to talk about is contract negotiations for AI ban clauses in these like unions like WGA, SAG-AFTRA. Mm-hmm. They had these historic length strikes, like because they thought the threat was very unprecedented, so that we have to have strong, contract negotiation efforts, and even to the point of, long strikes. Again, like, I do think it's very important to have a long-term oriented mindset, especially for these unions. And I think, to their credit, of course, there's always short-term incentives pulling in the other direction. But I think the unions have, the Hollywood unions have been considering these long-term considerations, which is, sure, a very long strike it hurts your wallet, sure, but in 3 years, if we don't have jobs because AI just replaced the film industry, then, like, you know, we have to fight.
That hurts your wallet more.
Even more, yeah. Right. So that's why I think it's going to be very important to have a long-term mindset for these contract negotiations when industries find, you know, even unclear signs that AI replacement is a real and potentially imminent threat.
Mm-hmm.
So
what about
yeah,
let's say, like, industries that don't have unions?
Industries that don't have
For
unions.
example, artists. Well, maybe that ship has already sailed. Maybe we just
So
have to
I
walk
think
that one back.
it's most. So there are people who say once an AI art model that can replace you cheaply, once it hits the market, you're permanently done. And I think this is too pessimistic.
I don't think that's true.
I don't think that's true either. But I think the tone of it, the tone of, like, the difficulty of reversing it is, like, true, I would say, but it's not impossible. It's just much, much harder once it hits the market. Once
Mm-hmm.
we as a society let it happen versus
Right.
not. Yeah. What was your question originally?
It's just like, I guess maybe for artists it doesn't matter because that Battleground is just copyright instead of, like,
Right.
unions. But let's say, I'm just trying to think, like, what careers don't have unions that are...
Like, artists don't have a strong union.
Right, but that's sort of, like, resolved with the copyright?
Well, it can. We'll see.
Hopefully.
Fair use precedents are quite case by case. So the human judges decide. So it's hard to predict. I think there's low-hanging fruit, which is there are unions that already exist that have not been caught up to, like, that informationally they have not been made aware of the severity and imminence of the threat for various reasons. So I think the low-hanging fruit is getting the influential unions that already exist up to speed.
Truckers union, maybe?
So I do think they're quite actually up to speed.
Okay.
So they're actually one of the more up to speed.
Yeah, because I guess AI driving has been
I think
in the popular eye for a while.
For some reason, AI driving has been in the popular eye
Which doesn't
for a
make any
while.
sense because it's so unsafe compared to, like, the other stuff. It doesn't make any sense to me why.
Yeah.
The fact that Elon Musk can say, oh, it's not actually self-driving, it's just named self-driving. And that's like an okay... It doesn't make any sense to me.
That's crazy.
Yeah, because that's why they can call their cars self-driving. It's something self-driving, like automatic self-driving or something. And that's like the name of the technology.
Here we are, episode 16, the first mention of Elon Musk or related products on the Into AI Safety podcast. Okay, so it's not automatic self-driving, it's Autopilot, and separately, full self-driving or FSD capabilities. Although this is what the technology has been named by Tesla, the company knows very well that this name is pretty misleading. A letter from Tesla to the California DMV in March of 2021 read, quote, "Currently, neither Autopilot nor FSD capability is an autonomous system, and currently no comprising feature, whether singularly or collectively, is autonomous or makes our vehicle autonomous," end quote. Later that year, the DMV launched an investigation into Tesla, and a little over another year later, it filed an administrative complaint. It took another year and a half for Tesla to respond to the complaint, which happened in December of 2023. Their defense was basically, we've been calling it that for like a decade, and you guys didn't do anything about it, and that's just what it's called now, so it's not false advertising.
Do you know, like, this is, okay, I'll give you a similar example from the Divide and Conquer paper Max and I wrote. So we were looking for examples of social influence campaigns by corporations against their opposition movements. And one of the examples we found was the establishment of the modern plastic recycling system.
Yeah.
You've read that. And I showed this to Max, and Max was like, that's just so sad. Like, I've been duped for all this time. And I also felt like that when I found this out. So basically, what happened was there was a public outcry of all this plastic waste, which is very unsustainable.
Right.
And the waste was piling up. People were very angry about it. The plastic industry and the oil industry, which is how plastic is made, had an evil but brilliant idea, which is we're going to pretend that most plastic is recyclable, and we're going to quietly lobby for the establishment of a permanent plastic recycling infrastructure that still continues strong to this day. Like, there is audience,
it's worse now than it used to be.
And like, you actually, there are actual quotes from the actual commission scientists and the executives, or the scientists were telling the executives, saying like, yeah, I don't think you can recycle most plastics, and also if you recycle it once, it becomes very hard to
do it again.
Feasibly recycle it a second time.
Right.
It's just like, doesn't make sense. But it didn't matter. There were front groups created by Big Plastic and Big Oil that just jammed the modern plastic recycling system down the throat of like all Americans.
Yeah.
We still think that plastic is recyclable. And the craziest thing is that, the 3-arrow recycling symbol, that symbol?
Yeah.
That doesn't mean anything. It's just a symbol.
The number is what matters.
Yeah, but the symbol itself, which people, it's almost like the self-driving term, right? For Elon Musk. It just people assume that it just is recyclable.
Right.
But
all plastic has to have it.
Yeah, so like even the non-recyclable variants. So
most of the variants. So I in Boulder at least. So Boulder's very big on like the environmental stuff, and so we had people from EcoCycle come into our schools on like a day every year at least once, and they would be like, okay, and then when I was in elementary school, it was still in the sort of the place where you were supposed to sort things yourself, and so there was like really big emphasis on number 2, number 3, and number 7 are the ones you can put in the recycling, and these other ones you can't put in the recycling.
I don't know how you would remember that.
I don't know if it's those exactly.
You still don't remember, right?
I don't. Well, not anymore, because they stopped doing that because I'm not totally sure. Maybe they just like it just wasn't getting done by enough people, so they were just like, yeah, whatever.
Of course it wasn't. It's totally
because but like
totally
that was like the requirement. It wasn't just it has recycling. It's the recycling things on there. Okay, you now have to make sure that the type of like container that it is, the type of plastic, is actually the kind that can be recyclable, and then you recycle it.
This sounds like exactly. Remember, EU AI Act. The upstream is the foundation model, the big tech foundation models.
Yeah.
And the downstream is users. And if we, if rules were influenced by the guys upstream. It can make it so that the downstream guys have no chance at like really, recycling effectively, or really, policing the very harmful things effectively.
Right.
If the upstream guys don't cooperate, then like there's basically no chance this will happen. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's actually like a really good, because it just shows, they set up this system where there is a very high cost to participating in like the thing that it's supposed to be.
Exactly.
And so because of that, most people just don't even understand that cost exists, and it doesn't get paid, and then the system doesn't work.
Yeah, it's
entirely on the consumer.
Okay, I got some details wrong here, but I wanted to provide the correct information to the extent that I can and point anything out that I'm not sure about or that you should check into further locally, because things are different depending on where you are. I'll go into a little bit of detail here, but definitely check out Dr. Park's paper, Divide and Conquer Dynamics in AI-Driven Disempowerment, for more on the roots of this problem and less into the plastic. Now, let's talk about the plastic. To start, the number in the center of recycling logos designates the kind of plastic resin that was used to create that product. Some types of plastic are much easier to recycle than others. In most places in the United States that have any recycling, number 1, number 2 plastics are accepted, since they are the easiest to reuse. Numbers 3 through 7 are more difficult, but depending on your local recycling provider, may be recyclable. Boulder's EcoCycle, however, represents basically state-of-the-art in terms of recycling, and has for a long time. I was able to dig up that the correct plastics to recycle through curbside recycling in Boulder when I was in elementary school were number 1, number 2, and number 5. And that is still true today. In addition, the remaining numbers can now be taken to Boulder's CHARM, or Center for Hard-to-Recycle Materials. Note that if your community does have recycling, it likely accepts a different subset of plastics. Oh, and lastly, they didn't stop doing those in-school workshops. I just grew out of them.
It's all sludge. It's like they just push out that responsibility to everyone else but themselves. The front groups and the big plastic, big oil, and now big AI. And I think that, again, plastic waste is probably not going to make us extinct. But there are very leading AI scientists without conflicts of interest who say AI can make humans extinct. It can replace humans at most jobs. This is possible. Mm-hmm. We can't prove it until it happens, of course. Right. But I still think the plastic recycling example is an important example of there is something that we as a society just accept, and it's completely made up. It has no basis in reality, and it was all started by a bunch of front groups for corporate interests, which I do think is a very important lesson. Even though plastic waste is not, I do think AI is a bigger threat than plastic waste. In human obsolescence and even human replacement as a species is on the table. But yeah, so that.
Okay, that was 3. Sorry, I didn't do what I said and be quicker, but we're on 4.
Fourth battleground, which I think is the most important battleground, which is so the 5th one is special. So I left the 5th one as last, but the 4th battleground is, I think, the most important of all of them, which is new laws and policies. Mm-hmm. So this, we are fortunate to live in a democracy, which means as long as we made our voices heard, new laws and policies can be passed. Theoretically. Now, there's lobbyists and corporate lobbyists, so it does get mucked up a bit, but theoretically this is a very, real and fundamental part of our democratic system. So as long as we, at StakeOut.AI and more generally, you and I, Jacob, and Dr. Park, as long as we get people informed of the severity and the imminence of this happening and also the harms that are happening right now, people can call or write to their representatives, and people can sign petitions like our ban deepfakes petition and our ban superintelligence petition, for example. Mm-hmm. People can mass sign petitions, and politicians can pass new laws and policies to rein in a technological threat that has gone rampant for some time and caused a lot of harm, but it's very possible to rein it in. So I think this is the most important battleground because anything is possible as long as enough people in the democracy demand it. There is a sufficient threshold, I think. Mm-hmm. And it also, all the previous battlegrounds, like discussion of AI and copyright and unions wanting a voice and moral critique of everyone from Professor Sutton saying he wants to replace humans with an AI successor species to OpenAI employees just wanting to make millions of dollars, even if it means there's no accountability for the CEO. All just moral critique in general. This all feeds into just the potential to pass new laws and policies that are necessary. So this, I think, is the most important battleground. To make it quick, let's talk about the fifth battleground. I can ask a question. Yeah. So the fifth battleground is whistleblower support.
Okay.
It's very special because the other ones are, they are done by people on Team Human, right?
Right.
Like it's just us and taking the initiative. This fifth one is also us taking the initiative on Team Human, but we also need whistleblowers on the side of the AI industry, right? Like people, and you're already seeing hints of this, right? Like even in EAC, like I would say a lot of them, and maybe even most of them, they probably don't, want humanity to be replaced, even though they kind of mindlessly put EAC in their bio, and they're just doing the meme, even though the EAC founders and intellectual leaders are inspired by human replacement by AI. But I think a lot of them, they are also like, they don't want humanity to be replaced, and they might not take the threat seriously, but as soon as they take the threat seriously, maybe they will whistleblow on the cult. That would be a huge step forward potentially. In the AI industry, the fact that these companies are racing towards super intelligent AI that can replace most human jobs, and all that's holding them back are weak self-regulatory measures. That, I think, is something where, especially once we get to the point of superintelligence actually being developed, if it ever happens, you might have more whistleblowers whose morality exceeds their personal and financial conflicts of interest. That might happen.
But we want to encourage.
We want to encourage and support
as much as possible. Exactly,
and I think most people want to do the right thing, and even the EAC, the people whose minds are cultist soups, like the EAC founders and intellectual leaders and the big tech titans like Gary Tennant and Mark Andreessen. I don't think if we can ever read their minds, which we can't, but if we could, they probably think they're doing the right thing. So I think everyone really wants to do the right thing. Of course, there are personal and financial conflicts of interest, which shift your internal definition of what the right thing is at any given time.
Right.
But I think not all of, but perhaps some of the employees of these big tech AI companies do see glimpses currently of what their employer is doing versus what is the right thing to do. And as soon as that becomes more of a visible threat that they feel like they have an obligation to act on, I think we might see opportunities for potential whistleblowers that we can support to get them over the fence.
We actually already have some of our first instances of AI whistleblowing, although it definitely isn't the whistleblowing story that is getting the most attention within the past few months. Shane Jones, an engineer at Microsoft, sent letters to the Federal Trade Commission chair, the OpenAI nonprofit board, and Microsoft's board of directors, explaining that it was far too easy to generate violent, sexual, and copyrighted images using Microsoft's Copilot designer, which has a backend of OpenAI's DALL-E 3. In one of the letters, he even mentions that when he learned Copilot designer was behind the explicit deepfake images of Taylor Swift that were circulating the internet a little while ago, he was not surprised. In addition, Shane mentioned that he had already tried to make a similar post over a month prior, but had been told by his manager to take it down immediately and that the Microsoft legal team would follow up with formal reasoning. The explanation never came, and despite asking multiple times to further the discussion surrounding his concerns, to address the issue and understand why he was made to take down his original post, he received no response from the corresponding Microsoft teams. He posted these letters publicly about 1 week ago, so we don't yet know what Microsoft's response will be, but I would like to thank Shane for being courageous enough to publicly take this stance despite the current lack of whistleblowing protections.
Okay, wait, so before we go on, I really want to talk. So recently, I believe Andrej Karpathy, who is working at OpenAI,
Yes. I don't know about that, but okay.
Well, so he's the guy who like in his free time made Archive Sanity Light.
Yes.
So that was his free time.
Yeah.
He does like a ton of machine learning stuff.
Yeah, so I know he's very accomplished in machine learning. I didn't know he worked at OpenAI.
I think he does.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure. I might be wrong.
Anyway, yeah.
Regardless, it's not as relevant because recently
Right.
he made a post on Twitter that was saying like,
Yeah.
it's not about creating human replacements. It's about creating the bicycle for the mind.
Yes. He is back at OpenAI, by the way.
Oh, he is. Okay,
Yeah.
that's what I thought.
Yeah.
And first of all, he's at OpenAI, but that's counter to OpenAI's mission.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, Sam Altman retweeted it.
Right.
So it's like, how do you make sense of that sort of behavior? Like, it's,
I think they are clearly feeling that the current, guardrails, the accountability that the CEO theoretically has to the board, they don't actually feel it, and they're acting as if they don't, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, Sam Altman, telling the EAC founder, you can't out accelerate me. Do you know about this tweet?
No, I don't.
So Sam Altman jokes around about oh yeah, EAC founder, you can't out accelerate me. He said he has an anonymous Twitter account, and he said oh yeah, you guys your minds are gonna be blown or something like that if you found out what my anonymous Twitter account is. He says something like this. So anonymous Twitter account is, of course, many EACs only post through anonymous Twitter accounts, which is very unfortunate because they are, the roots of this ideology are pro-human replacement. And the fact that you have the CEO, Sam Altman, joking about accelerationism, effective accelerationism, and the anonymous Twitter accounts of EAC, and retweeting tweets like this. I think it's, again, theoretically, you could say we're going to create highly autonomous systems that outperform humans at most economically valuable work, but we want to do so in a way that doesn't replace humans.
Can you?
So, in terms of economic incentives, it will not happen.
Right.
You're right, but I think, okay, so I do think everyone wants to be the good guy. Everyone wants to do the right thing, and Karpathy clearly has the sense that most people would agree with, that mass replacing human occupations is bad, which is why he said it. But just because AI company employees want something to happen doesn't mean that if all of them do their jobs in the grand plan that CEO Sam Altman set out, that the bad thing won't happen, right?
Right, no. And I guess that's part of and then just the fact that Sam Altman retweeted it, I think, is demonstrative of trying to appear more centrist.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Then
very plausible.
Because why else would you retweet it?
Yeah,
it's literally. In any realistic sense,
right,
of what the OpenAI mission is,
right,
it's counter to that realistic mission. Maybe it's not directly counter to the theoretical mission,
right,
but if you follow that theoretical mission to its logical conclusion, it necessarily replaces humans at those economically viable jobs, right?
Yeah.
This one's going to be short just to clear up some confusions and to clarify that I was right. Anyways, Karpathy was part of the founding team of OpenAI and worked there from 2015 to 2017, at which point he left for Tesla. But in 2023, he returned to OpenAI. So at the time of the interview, I was right. He did work at OpenAI. But just 11 days later, Karpathy announced that he was leaving the company to pursue his own projects. Sounds like maybe he made the same connections that I did.
So I think I do think this is very plausible that the CEO of the company, Sam Altman, is retweeting something or proclaiming something to throw us off of something, like something that he doesn't want us to know, which is probably what you're saying, which is that if at the current trajectory, without outside guardrails like government and new laws and policies, this probably will not end well. I think it's very textbook corporate social influence campaign is to get people off of sense like this, get people off of realizing truths like this. So I think that's very plausible. I do think most people want to be the good guy, even Karpathy and Sam Altman. I think we have to approach it like that. We have to, because like when you see people do these like very contradictory things, or even like very hard to understand things, like Professor Rich Sutton saying he thinks it's a great thing if humans were replaced by AI, stuff like that. I think in a lot of these situations, when they say it, it's also prudent to be like, okay, like what let's assume I'm that person for a bit, like, and let's assume that I'm actually, at least abstractly or like in some sense, in some personal idiosyncratic sense, trying to do the right thing, at least trying to do the right thing for myself, or maybe to broader community, maybe to my family and friends, or maybe even to country and the humanity. Like going into the shoes of that person, like what, like how might what they said here, or how might what they acted here be explainable under that assumption. I think this is important because I think a lot of, especially from the pro-human side, like when we look at people in the AI industry, when we look from the outside, and they're like, wow, how could they do that? They must be scheming evil people. And from the AI industry and looking into the team human or pro-human side, they'd be like, oh, they're just Luddites want to destroy technology and just want us to be hunter-gatherers or whatever. And I think in order to get a better prediction of what is actually causing them to say these things or behave these behaviors, it makes sense to assume they truly think they're doing the right thing in some sense.
Right. No, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think applying
it's an exercise in empathy.
Yeah, I think that's very important in
everything.
Everything. Yeah, getting people to feel heard, steering situations to good directions, and I think Karpathy is someone who poured his heart and soul into the field of AI and wants it to be good, right?
Right.
And is saying this, and he probably truly means it, even though it, systemically, as you said, like OpenAI in this current trajectory does not seem to be in the direction of achieving what Karpathy wants. Right. And I think Sam Altman, maybe some hint of this, and also some hint of like trying to throw people off the scent that Sam Altman, CEO's grand plan is also in his current trajectory, unless regulated by outside forces will be in this bad direction. Even though I think a lot of people are saying that Sam Altman also wants it to be in a good direction. I have never met Altman, but I think part of it could also be risk, the lack of the necessary risk aversion, or insanely high risk tolerance, right? So if you have a plan, if you have a grand plan that would wipe out humanity with even 10% probability, which to me sounds unacceptable. Even 1% would be unacceptable, honestly.
Absolutely.
And maybe even 0.1% would be unacceptable. But you have some let's say 10%, 90% you actually do think we'll get bicycle level, we'll have just this glorious AI does everything for us and we can do poetry or whatever. Which again, if you look at the economic incentives, it just does not seem plausible. But if you believe something like this, you might press the button, right? And I think the fact that this, doing this grand plan or pressing the button affects all of us, means that we should feel like we have the right to voice our concerns about like our rights being affected as well.
Well, I think a big portion of the problem, at least in my perspective, is not as much the technical part.
Right.
It's more of like this question of we shouldn't be allowing arbitrary person X to have that choice for everyone.
That's exactly right.
Like it should be a widely accepted thing. If as society we agree that we want to press the button and accept that 90-10 risk, like okay, sure.
Yeah.
I don't think that would happen, but let's say that we got consensus that that's what we wanted to do. Then I think that makes sense, and one person can be the final person that pressed the button.
Right.
But if you don't actually like probe what people want and determine it, and then you're just like, well, I think it's good, and then press the button. That's authoritarian.
And there you have that. I know this episode has already been long, so before I sign off, I'll just give a quick reminder. If you think that the work I'm doing is valuable, please share the podcast with your friends and family, and let me know any questions or requests that you have, which I may be able to help with. So long, Spider-Man!